All right. Today we're going to take a look at the final topic in JavaScript. Since we're moving along so quick, I think I'm going to add a unit on jQuery
Oh, cool.
because this one should go pretty quick. And unlike previous classes, most of you have a pretty in-depth experience with arrays because of our fighting with Swift and a little bit in C# as well. In the past, when I've taught this class, this is really where we first hit the in-depth look at arrays. So for those of you who feel a little fuzzy on arrays, hopefully this will clarify some of those things. JavaScript doesn't have all the capabilities that the other languages do, but it has some the others don't. So it's a nice combination of those things. In JavaScript, an array is a class. It's a built-in class that we can use. And the nice thing about the arrays in JavaScript is that they're dynamic. We can add elements, remove elements, just like we can in Swift from the arrays as we need to. Go ahead.
OneDrive, or is this?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there is a starter. The starter for this is Unit 12.
My computer's updating.
Yeah, it's a small one, so it doesn't take long to download.
So there isn't actually array types in JavaScript? Like
There's no array types. It's all built around a class.
So do you need to send it a type as well?
No. The other part that is set up there that I probably blew right by is that the types are the elements are untyped because variables are untyped, right? So if we have an array of variables, and the variables can be any type we need them to be, and some of you are doing a nice job of flipping between strings and numbers and back again. Right? If they're untyped, then the elements of the array are untyped. But for most programmers' sanity's sake, they're all the same, or at least compatible. So you could put some strings in there that represent numbers and some numbers in there at the same time and probably process those okay. But mixing in addresses and then some numbers and then some other strings and things, you, the programmer, have to make sure those appear in just the right order so that the types don't get messed up.
But otherwise you could, right?
You could, yeah. Doesn't mean you want to. That does come into play a little bit later. JavaScript does also have associative arrays, and associative arrays, instead of having indexes as numbers, element 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each element in the array is a key value pair. So you can create basically a single record. And we'll talk about those either today or at the end of the recordings next time. So yeah, we can put anything inside the array that we need to. Can declare arrays in a bunch of different ways. The first one just declares an empty array. This is the new version of that. It's the one I would probably use most of the time because it's just a little less typing. It's just a shortcut, still creates an array using a class. This a little less common. I want an array that has 15 empty elements in it. We don't do that too much today because arrays are dynamic. In the past, you had to kind of figure how big the array was going to be and then you'd fill it. But today with dynamic arrays, we just keep adding things and adding things as we need them, and when we need to know how many there are, we'll ask later. So this is a little less common than it used to be. We can initialize an array. These are parentheses, and inside the parentheses there's a set of values. And again, John could mix around there and throw his name in the middle of that, and it'll work fine. But when you process it and try to calculate the average and you throw John in there, you got to be careful that you at least try to parse it and fail and deal with the failure and all that kind of stuff. And finally, here's the new and improved version of declaring an array with elements already in it. It's the square bracket version, so you don't need the new array parentheses. So just as an example, let's go into the sample program, and if you go into the JavaScript, this is what it generates right now. There's not much to it. Looks like I did leave one command in there that I didn't mean to, but that's all right. So the first one we don't have to type, it's already there. Notice I didn't even say new. Technically, we should say it's a new array. And by the way, while I have the recording going, I've been noticing, let's call it a lack of discipline putting vars on your variables. And I did a little research to see if I should be picky about that or whether I should let it go. The answer is I should be picky about that. If you declare a variable inside of a function and you don't use var, it automatically becomes a global variable. And that can cause all kinds of problems later. When you think a variable is local and you're using it global, you mistype one, it creates, and you don't do a var, it creates a global variable. And so every page that I visited said it might work, and you may not cause you any grief yet, but it's very likely to. So unless you want a global variable, declare your variables with vars.
So if it doesn't have a var, it's assuming you've already declared it, but when it goes to look and
It's not there, then it
just
creates
report
it. It creates it. And what you don't see is when that method ends, the variable's still there. And so when you create it again in another class, thinking, and if you put a var on it, it makes it local and overrides the global one. But if you don't put the var on it again and you're thinking you're overriding that value, there's already something in there.
So like for indexes on a for loop, if you use I and you don't put var,
It becomes a global variable.
with whatever you ended your
Mhm.
previous one.
And that's not usually what you want. If nothing else, for the garbage collection and the memory management, you want to declare it as a var. I remember, I don't know if it was last year, we wrote a program or somebody wrote a program that didn't put a var on a variable. And it was an hour's debugging trying to figure out why it wasn't working the way it was supposed to. It's because it was this hidden global variable and it was retaining its value. So it's a good idea. Try to be a little more diligent about that. I got enough grading, they probably won't see them if you miss them, but it's probably a good idea to put them in. So the other alternative here is to create an array called array2, and it's just going to be a new array. Then we'll try it with the 15. Notice there is no way using the square brackets to declare an array that has a size already. If I put 15 inside the square brackets, that's a one element array with a 15 in it. So that's not what I want. So if you want to, and I've already said this isn't very common anymore, if you want to declare an array that has a size to start with, you have to use that technique. And we'll do another one, array 4. It's going to be a new array with some values in it. Let's just use 11, 22, 33, 44, and 55 as examples. If I made that a 55.5, kind of answers John's question as well. In some languages, this makes it an array of doubles. Not here. Here it's an array of 5 different numbers, one of which happens to have a decimal place. In JavaScript, they're not typically distinguished. And finally, let's declare the same array, same numbers, but in a square bracket definition. Underneath that, I've already coded statements that display the size of each one of the arrays. As we saw in the preview, this one has an array of 0 elements. This one should do the same. This one should have an array of 15 elements. When you ask for the length, it doesn't give you the last index. It gives you how many. This one has 5. This one has 5. These are indexed 0 through 4 as they are in most other languages. What's the matter with my Chrome here? There's the sizes. This is left over from someplace else. How did those come back? Oh, before we weren't seeing this other stuff because there was an error. We said display array 2. There was no array 2, so JavaScript crashed. This other stuff is showing up now because of that, and I really don't want this contain stuff to show up until later. But here's the sizes as we anticipated. That one's interesting. Well, that's array 3, size 15. It's not interesting. Sorry. Array 4, size 5. Array 5, size 5. Pretty much what we expected. Notice that in this case, and here's the, now that I think about it, these contains aren't so bad. This array contains nothing. This array contains nothing because we initialized it that way. This array includes these double arrow, these double equal signs I've been putting in between the elements. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 elements inside. And here's the ones we did before. So as we put stuff in there, we get to see it. But if you declare an array size 15, basically has nothing in it. But this display, how did I do that? Let's take a look. Using a join. The array class has a toString built into it that will join the elements of your array with spaces in between. If you have words, that doesn't help you very much. So in addition to the toString class, the array class includes a join function that joins all the elements of an array, and if you wish, you can specify the characters that are used between them. What's nice about join is it only puts those equal signs between them. It does not put them extra set at the end. If we wrote our own, it would take a little bit of extra logic to make sure that didn't happen. So that's built into the array if you want a quick look at what's inside. That's primarily used for debugging. To assign a new value to an index, you just use the square brackets like in most languages. So I can define here my array, whatever the array name is, pick the index by number, and assign it a new value. If you wish, you can also very quickly add to the end of the array by using that length function. Remember, the indexes are always off by 1, so if we have 5 elements in our array, it's 0 to 5. So this says add to my array at position 5, index 5, a new value. So I believe I have something in here, assign a sample string to the array's third element. What does that say? With index 10. Oh, I didn't make, the third array. So now if I come in here and I say array 3 sub item 10 equals Volker, it'll put that into the middle. If I then add one to index 20, perfectly legal. There's only 15 elements in the array. Doesn't matter. This will create a 20th element of the array, and all the elements in between have that empty value. So here's my third array now. Notice it's got Volker out here. If we counted, again, this is position 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But also notice that the array is much larger than it used to be, and it includes snowing out at the end now. So the cool thing about these unsized arrays is you can throw stuff in wherever you want them to. So if Tim is getting high temperatures for 10 o'clock in the morning and then 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he can use the indexes in whatever order he wants to and fill them in. If we want to, we can delete an element from an array. And what I'm missing here is how do I tell if an item is missing? Because this said check to see if the element in the third array is undefined. If so, assign it a sample value. If exists, I missed that piece. I don't remember that in my notes. I can delete them. It's not in there. That's interesting. Tell myself to do it, and check to see if it's I don't know if it's the empty string. Let's find out. I know the position to 9 is empty if array 3 at 9, probably stop there. Huh? In most of the curly bracket languages, I can stop there and say if it's defined, then change it to what? Snowing. Otherwise, if it's not defined, let's set it to clear.
Got your phone.
Thank you. So what I expect is this to say it's not really there because I never put anything in there. And it wasn't.
So if you refresh it again, it'll say something.
Pardon me?
If you refresh it again, it'll say something.
No, because every time I refresh my page, the array starts off with what I put in it in code. I never put anything in it in code. So the array still gets initialized, Voker and Snowing get added, but clear is not really part of the initial part of it. This doesn't have any memory when it comes to that. Now the next question I have is what if I said equals the empty string? That's true as well. And one final question, what if I say triple equals the empty string? Remember, double equals means it's basically the same. 2 and the number 2 in quotes are basically the same. Triple equals means not only do they have the same value, but they have the same type.
Even that's false though, because it's so clear, isn't it?
No, because every time the program starts, it rebuilds the array. Every time I refresh the page, it rebuilds the array. Oh, it's still false, you're right.
So it's not an empty string no matter what.
If it equals, that turned up false. So it's not equal to the empty string. It's not equal to the empty string that way, right? Those are false, not true. I'm thinking of this backwards because clear means it was clear. This means it exists. What do I really want to test here?
Is it null?
This is false. All the others are false. If it's not equal to, that's what I'm looking for, the empty string. That's still going to be false. It's always going to come up clear, I think.
It is null.
It is null.
Yeah, the value in array 3 at 9 is null.
How do you know?
I tested it. I asked if it equals null. It does.
Double equal or triple equal?
Double.
Double. All right. And is the empty string the same as null? Not in our mind, but it's typically the same thing. But bottom line is if you want to know if there's something in an element, if it's been filled in, if Tim's going through and saying only give me the elements that are filled in, you can check with just about any one of these, see if it's the empty string. Easiest way to check to see if it's there is this. If it's there, change it to snowing. So I know there's something in position 10. Maybe we change all these to 10 and do a test on that. So now this Voker should turn into snowing. And it does. if I say if it's not equal to empty string, should still be snowing, right? And it is. What if we say not double equal to? Still snowing. So it looks like empty string, null. Did you compare it to null? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Unless you specifically make it. If you ask,
True, but JavaScript treats a lot of these things as the same thing. False, null, and even the empty string. A lot of times get treated the same way. That's what I'm checking for not equal to. If it's not equal to null,
3 equal signs don't work. Only 2.
three equal signs don't work. 2 does. But this one, if it is equal to null, it's not. So now in this case, because it's equal to, if I did a double equal to, I'm going to get it clear, right? In this case,
Yes.
it's going to change Volcker to clear. Because it's not, if it's equal to null, it's snowing. It's not equal to null, it's got Volcker in it, should go to clear. Got my head spinning around here. So let's just do it this way. Let's turn the debugger on, if I can remember how. Playing around in Chrome too much here. Should go back to Firefox. I have to refresh this every time anyways because it's JavaScript that I'm changing. That live change only works when you're doing it in HTML or CSS from brackets. But anyways, I want to go to developer and tools. So, thank you. I'm sorry. I got to go where I'm comfortable. Wasting too much time here.
So if you ask if the array 3 at 9, if you just ask that question,
If array 3 at 9.
you know, like you would ask it
Mm-hmm.
properly, that will return true if it's null or the empty string. Now if you explicitly say array 3 at 9 equals empty string,
Then it doesn't match null.
yes.
So basically, if you asked if it exists, or if
Yep.
you're asking if it's empty, because if it returns true, it's only going to return true if it's either empty or it doesn't exist. When you get it, right?
Yes.
That's weird.
How often do we process empty arrays?
That's a weird thing.
The other thing to think about is how often do we process empty arrays, and the answer is not very often. So it's not a real killer in any case.
If it's null or the empty string could be false. Otherwise, it's always going to be true.
so if you don't compare it to.
I'm not sure about zero.
Okay, so you're asking if it exists.
Yes.
So yeah, if it exists. Yeah.
What if you do that to the 21?
But no,
I don't know.
21 doesn't exist.
But
if nothing's there,
Yep.
then it's false. If anything's there, other than null and empty.
Why did my breakpoint not stop?
I can never get breakpoints to work.
21 also returns false because it doesn't exist.
Interesting. So whether it's there or whether it's not there, if
Whether
it's not
or
there,
null,
there but null or there but empty string, it always returns.
In other words, if it has a value, it's true.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's false.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that.
Stated simply.
Thanks, Randy. What's else?
I think these breakpoints, because they're in window on load, won't work. I think. Seems to me that breakpoint ought to kick in.
and also if it's 0, it returns false. The number 0.
The number 0, not the string 0.
Yes.
I bet if it's the string 0, it returns true.
Yep.
That can be handy. Figure out if your 0 is a number string.
But 0 is equivalent to false. So if you're asking, is it equal to 0, that's equivalent to false. Unless you double equal, is it double equals 0?
What's that?
Did you double equal 0 or single equals 0 then?
No, he's just asking if array 21 or array 9.
Double equals 0 or equals 0?
No, just array 3 at 9.
He's treating the index as a boolean.
The index as a Boolean?
Yeah. So it's true if there's something in it. If it,
Back to the code then, what else? There's lots of different ways to check for null after all our playing around there. Easiest answer is to check for this. The downside to doing it this way, if you want to know if it's missing, the downside to doing it this way is if the value contains a 0, it'll return false. Because it'll analyze it, so it has a 0 in it, but that 0 returns a value of false, which is equivalent to false in JavaScript. So you have to be very careful there. This is where the triple equal may come in most handy. Triple equals null. Because as Paul found, if you put an empty string in there, it doesn't match, right?
Yes, but that was with double equals null.
Yeah, even with triple equals null. And this is basically saying, is it missing? And 10 is not missing, so in this case it should change it to snowing. But if I go back to 9 here, I shouldn't be able to do on 9 triple equals the empty string, but I thought we did that and it still said clearing. Because 9 is missing. And it went to clearing. So that is not equal to true. Triple equals the empty string is not true. It's missing.
Yeah.
If I triple equal sign the null, then I should get snowing. And I didn't. Why didn't I?
Try double equals.
so that,
Double equals also matches the empty string.
If you explicitly say, if you assign null to index 9, the triple equal sign null does work, but only if you explicitly set it to null in the first place.
so what is it set to? Explicitly set to null.
I don't know, because double equals null works, no matter what.
What's the point of triple?
I don't know. I'm not identical instead of equals.
They're the same thing.
Not sure exactly what it means.
Yuck. If the type of the array index is undefined, then it's missing. Really? I must have been cheating last year, or triple equals undefined.
To find out what.
There's my snowing. So that's probably the best way to do it because of all the other weird things that can happen with null, not null, etc. This is probably the best way to check to see if the array element is undefined.
Now also, if you set index 9 to null, that will come out as false.
setting.
Yep. But now if you make it only 2 equal signs, that would be true.
Well, 2 equal signs has a lot of flexibility and it's scary. That's kind of the point of the discussion.
Okay,
Not so much how do I tell if an array element is empty because that's rare anyways.
okay.
The point of the discussion is double equal signs in these comparisons be very risky sometimes because you may get equality where you really don't want equality. I know that Adam's been putting triple equal signs or an exclamation mark double equal sign on just about every comparison that he uses. Because if they're not the same type, do you really want them to match as true? So null is not the same as undefined. Null is, wow.
But you can also set it to undefined if you want to. and that
Yeah,
would match.
lovely. Don't leave your array elements blank. I think that's what I've learned when I've done this. Okay. So we know how to put stuff in there. We can delete array elements. If you delete an array element, it doesn't move everybody else in. It just leaves you one of those undefined elements in between. Again, not something we do a lot of. If you really want to delete it, then you got different problems. There is a way to do that. I think I remember reading it. It might be a different language where you just set it to a different array value. And then when you set one array to the other, it takes all the undefined ones out. For loops and arrays go together like peanut butter and jelly. Rarely do you have an array that isn't processed somehow using a for loop. Classic for loop works if you have an indexed array, which many of them are. More often than not, instead of I less than or equal to array length, I equals 0 less than or equal to. And that lets us use the magic number length, also lets us use the beginning index, but we never try to process the length array because there isn't one. It's always off the end. Excuse me?
Less than or equal to though?
No.
Less than?
It's less than. Because the length is 5. But if there's 5 elements in the array, I only process 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. When you're processing arrays, you typically start at 0 and process as long as you're less than the length. But again, I don't even want to worry about it, and that's where the for loop, the for each loop comes in, or in this case the for in loop comes in, because it'll walk through every element of the array. What's a little misleading here is I put the word element in there, and that's not true in this language. In JavaScript, when you walk through the array using a for loop, a for in loop, it doesn't give you the elements like some languages do. It gives you instead the index, every single index. So that variable element will reflect every index in the array. Let's show that. For a variable, I'm going to say element, but I'm not going to leave it that way for very long. In, let's use array 5, because it has elements in. If inside my for loop I then display just the element, followed by a break, I should get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Not the values that are in the array, but the element, the index of those elements. That's what the for in loop in JavaScript does, is it picks all the indexes so that we don't have to designate them as 0 in length or whatever we want. We simply say for every index in the array, I would normally change this to index, but let me make sure this works. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I want the elements from that, then I have to ask for them. So I'm changing element index. So now what I'm saying is go through each one of the indexes. I like that better. For each index in the array 5, give me the value at that index. And so this time, I get the values of those indexes instead of the indexes themselves. And you can use either one. The point is, this is different than some of the other four. It's definitely different than the for each loop in C#. The for each loop in C#, if I had said for each index or for each element in this array, I would have gotten the 11, 22, 33s right away using the variable in the for loop. The downside is, if you use a for each in C#, you don't have the access. You don't have access to the index.
Plus there's the undefined elements in the array.
If there are undefined elements in the array, if I understand this right, it skips them.
Skips them.
Whereas if you did the 0 through 5 and there were undefined elements in there, it would process them. So let's delete one of those and see what happens with the two different loops. So let's remove 0, 1, 2. So just before here, I'm going to say delete array 5 position 2. So now here I should see this 33. The equal signs will still be there, but the 33 won't have anything in it. And you'll see the 33 goes away from here, but there's no gap. I deleted it after the fact. Notice there's no gap here. Just to prove it, I'm going to move this delete up. Before I display what's inside, put it where I wanted it in the first place. I should follow my own instructions sometimes. And notice that element still exists. The position still exists. There's just nothing in it. And when you use a for each loop, it doesn't display it. If I do a for in loop instead, or I mean a for index loop instead, it will. And notice what it returns. So another nice feature of the for each loop is it skips stuff that's not defined. Again, that assumes you got empty stuff in the array, and that just doesn't happen very, at least not in my world. I don't have elements of the array that are missing. It's good to know how some of that stuff works. If you want to pass elements to a function or arrays to a function, simply put the array name in there and send it. That's it. And then inside the function, the array is still an array. It's actually passed by reference, which means a pointer to the array is sent to you, and the function can then manipulate the outside array. So here's my display array function. Instead of displaying up there, we can display in here. But then up here, I have to say that I want to display it by calling the function.
Gotta change it in your function.
Hmm?
The array in your function should be array 5.
No. No, he wants me to change this to array 5. This is the local array. This is the name of the array that display array uses. So I can send it any array I want.
The loop should be the array.
This loop? Oh, that should be the array. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Sure.
Just what he said. I get the same results because I'm still calling it twice. But now if I send it array number 4, array 4 doesn't have anything deleted from it. I don't have to change this function because this function takes whatever array I send it and displays it. And now the 40 or the 33 is back. It's still undefined here because that part of the array, this one's time to comment this one out. Because this one we're really not. It's the other alternative. So sending arrays to functions, very simple. You just send them and use them. And if I change it inside here, which is usually not a good idea, but if in here I say delete the array at position 2, that will delete it again. And the for each loop won't display the 33, and out here it'll be missing. As well. So first of all, let me comment this out and show you that now that I'm displaying array 4 twice, I get a full set of the arrays. Okay, full set. But now when I pass this in, out here I'm going to display array 4 after display array has changed it. And even outside, it's undefined. That just proves that it's passing by reference. You're not sending a copy of the array. Most of the time when you send a value to a function, you send a copy of that function, of that value. And if the function changes it, the outside world doesn't know about it. When you send an array, you're passing by reference. And you're sending not a copy, but a link to the original. And so any changes you make to the array inside are reflected outside. But again, this is not something I'd normally do.
Why?
Another thing I'm recognizing in some of your programs is many of you are starting to write dual purpose functions. Calculate and display. You have a function that calculates the average of a bunch of numbers and immediately throws it on the form someplace.
You're looking at me, aren't you?
No, I'm looking at the whole group because you're not. If you're feeling guilty, you're not the only one, right? Who are writing dual purpose functions. Functions do one single thing: calculate the average, or whatever it is you're calculating. If it also displays it, then the name ought to include it, but then you have to put the word and in there, and if you're putting an and in there, you get a dual purpose function. You know, not a good idea. Works, absolutely, it works. But functions should not be mixing inputs, calculations, and outputs. You don't have a function that calculates the sum, the average, the mean, and the median. You have 4 functions that do that. Makes them much more reusable. The next time you write a function to calculate the average, you probably won't want it to display, and then you're going to have to yank it out. It's much better to let the display happen after the calculation is done. Justin?
You called the display array 4 first.
Right here, yep.
Why did that still display the?
There's no 33.
Oh, all right, never mind.
Down here, this one removed the 33, then displayed the array. Because it's a 4-in array or 4-in loop, it doesn't display the missing values.
Right, where the other one
Then we come back and we say now display array 4 using an indexed loop. And using the indexed loop, it goes through every element and tells me the third one's undefined, even though it wasn't when I came in.
When do you copy a value over instead of sending it a pointer to the variable? So like here
In
you send
JavaScript, are you asking me how can I send a pointer to a variable if I wanted to do that?
No, that's what that's doing right here.
That's what this is doing because the array is a class. In most languages, when you send an object
Okay.
to a function, you're sending a copy of it. I'm sorry, you're sending a pointer to it. Swift was the exception, if I remember right. Swift makes copies of all those things. It's crazy. Normally, when you send an object to a function, you send a pointer to the object, so you change the original if you change anything inside.
So that's only for classes, not like regular variables.
Regular variables are passed by value or copy. It sends the value in. So here's a 4. I got a 4. Here's a 4. The variable itself, the memory location, is not sent. So any changes that are made inside the function are lost when you leave the function. You could consider them, if this is not an object, if this is a regular integer or something, or a regular variable here in JavaScript, if you send a regular variable in here that is not an object, it is passed by value, and you can consider it a local variable. Because once you leave, anything you did to that variable is lost. If you send an object, an array in this case, then it's a pointer, and anything you do to the original is retained because you changed the original. Harold?
What if you make it, God forbid, a global variable?
Then I don't have to send it at all, right? And so if I make it a global variable and then change it inside here, but it was passed in, if you pass it in, it's now a local variable. You're changing the local one, it won't change the global one.
That's why you wouldn't pass it in, you just use it.
If I wanted it to change, you're right, I wouldn't pass it in because that's another very dangerous, nasty, non-maintainable pitfall. I have a global variable, but I'm sending it to you. As long as I don't change it, it doesn't matter. It's when you change these things that things matter. If I send a global variable into a function and I expect that function to change the global variable, I just blew it because I sent it a copy of what the global variable has now, and the function is using the local one, even though there's a global copy of it. That's probably not what you intended. So be careful there. And then imagine what happens if I forget the var on a variable someplace I don't know is global. The more I learn about JavaScript, the funner it is to program, but the less I like the language because there's so much danger in this flexibility of variables. Swift gives you that flexibility with the discipline to say you can't be messing with its type. All right, let's take 10 and come back and we'll learn some more.